bank and I've gone missing. Road tripping, I can't find my way back. Windows down, I've released the clouds. Sipping crown, and I'm about to lay.
Well, hi, Margot.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm doing super well. How are you?
Good. Well, congratulations on writing a book that's Amazon's bestseller.
Thank you. It was super fun and such an amazing creative experience.
How was the feeling when you found out that it was going to be nominated as Amazon's bestseller?
Well, I was super excited. I worked really hard by pushing a lot of business, a lot of people that way in a very small amount of time to make it work. But what was the funnest thing about the book was how it came into being. If you want to hear that really quickly,
Okay.
I didn't even know what the topic was. I actually attended a writing workshop and I sat down to write a book in 2 days and I just started writing.
So you wrote that book in 2 days?
I did. I wrote
Wow.
85% of it and then I edited it and added some things to it and rearranged it, but the majority of it was written in 2 days.
Now, what made you want to write a book, or what? Yeah.
Well, I had this sensation that I had something really important to share with the world. And it was like this message I wanted to get out. And I wasn't quite sure what exactly the message was, but I knew I had some really powerful experiences of transformation in my life. And so it was recommended to me to just allow the creative energy to come forth and just start writing and see what came out. And that's how the Golden Cage, from entrapment to empowerment, that book happened. And it was, so the book is, as you know, Omar, is basically, part of my story, my life story. And then there's some coaching tips and it just started pouring forth basically.
Mm. And Amazon is a huge corporation, and they're doing a lot of things with, a lot of things is good, a lot of things is bad, but as far as the good things about it, people, it seems that people are now have more access to writing their own books, or doing, kind of being their own entrepreneurs, right?
Yeah, I'm really grateful for the Amazon platform and for the ability to self-publish so easily with Amazon, and also to make modifications specifically to your ebook. You can continue to modify, I guess, if you wish, because you can upload a new version and just change the cover, and it just makes publishing so easy.
No, you wrote it in 2 days. And what was besides the writing part that only took you 2 days, what was the process prior to that?
Well, so I had a vision. This sounds funny, but anyway, I had a vision of kind of this cage. I kept seeing myself kind of in this cage, and so the golden cage was coming to me. This visual of being trapped in my life and how I had escaped the golden cage through this empowerment process. So I think that's what happened is I started getting this kind of knowing that there was a topic about entrapment that I wanted to bring out to the world. And that's why writing the book was actually fairly easy. And I don't mean to say that I spent the next month editing it and rearranging it, but I had most of it done in a couple days process.
Right. And I feel like sometimes that's like, that you're a perfect example of that too, where sometimes, when you're doing something, it doesn't have to be perfect. Sometimes
Right.
when you just do it without even thinking about it, you never know, and it can become a hit. Of course, that doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen often. And I would say you're a perfect example of that.
Well, and I think it's trusting yourself, trusting that the messages that are coming up and just allowing them to flow instead of getting into the brain, and really focusing more on, I think, your kind of gut or your heart, your natural inspiration. And so, I mean, part of the golden cage, in fact, a lot of it is about learning to sort of trust what's true for you, trust your heart's calling. What do you really want to do in your life versus staying stuck in a cage, staying stuck where you're trapped. And so even that writing process for me was very liberating.
as I'm reading your book, I think you took like the perfect kind of perfect name for it as the golden cage, because it is like, if you were to be trapped, it would be in the golden cage. One, because it's like you can't get out, but two, it's this fancy, shiny cage that you almost don't want to leave because it's golden.
Such a great explanation, Omar. One of the how I would say it is that basically the gold is represents all those things that you think are good about it or that you're attached to, like financial security if it's a career that you're trapped in, like a career cage. Or in a relationship, it could be simply that it's comfortable or that you have, family and friends that you've gotten used to being a part of and your life just feels easy. But you may not actually be that happy. So the problem with the golden cage is that, well, it may look good from the outside, very prestigious. Maybe you're financially awarded, or it should be good, quote unquote. You don't feel it's really good in your heart. You feel trapped in your heart. So one of the examples I use in my book is my career at Procter and Gamble in marketing. I had this very prestigious career where everybody, all my friends were like, wow, you have the most amazing job. It was in Paris, in France, and I
Wow.
was a brand manager. And yet I was really miserable because it was not following my heart. I felt trapped.
Right.
And I
And
was staying there because I was scared to leave the comfort of the cage.
right. And I mean, I like how you use that golden cage metaphor for both relationships and careers. And that's a lot of, you know, that's a lot of thing that a lot of people thrive for when they graduate high school, when they graduate college, is to go work at this huge corporation to where they can say, you know what, I made it. But sometimes it may feel like you made it, I would say probably for only a couple of months or a couple of years, and
Mhm.
then after that, that's when you start, or you should questioning yourself, right?
Totally. I totally agree with you. Yes. Like there's this sense of like, oh, wow, I finally got to where I want to be. And yet, as you dive further into it, you may discover that it's really not satisfying your heart, especially if you did it because you thought it was a good thing to do because of societal conditioning. Maybe your parents thought this was something you should do, or your friends. And I know for me, for instance, I decided to major in international business and go for a career in the corporate world in marketing when I really actually wanted to be a psychotherapist. But I was afraid of doing that. I thought that psychotherapy would be, too challenging and not financially stable enough.
Mm. Now, were you living in Paris, or they fly you out to Paris? How did that work out?
no, I no, I've always loved France. France has been one of my passions in French. And so when I was 12, I embarked on a lifelong dream to one day live in France. Basically, I told my mother, I want to live in France. I started learning French. I went there and spent the summers when I was 16 and 17 in France.
Wow.
And then in school, I went to an international school, basically where they had an exchange program. So my junior year abroad, I studied in Paris, and I then graduated. And soon after that, I'm skipping a little, I basically um, I enrolled in an MBA to go in a Parisian
Mm,
School of Business Management. So I I really was well established in France. I already had an MBA, and then I did an internship with Procter and Gamble, and they hired me
mm,
because of the internship.
mm. Do you miss Paris?
Oh, sometimes I totally love speaking French and the French people and the culture. And so yes, it's near and dear to my heart.
Mm. And I mean, you went to, and was there something, just like we said, is something to do with what society kind of expects out of you to kind of just go to high school, go to college, get, your business degree or wherever degree is, and go try to go to these corporations. Was that mostly what was it about, what it was about?
Yeah, well, I grew up my childhood and my teenage years and so forth, I had a single mom, and then she remarried. Still, the money was tight. And there was always these financial concerns. And when I was, a teenager thinking about my future career, I was like, oh, I don't want to have financial challenges. I want stability. I want a career where I can make some good money and that's lucrative and prestigious. And so I sort of went for that route. Yet there was always a little voice saying, I don't know if you really should do that. You're not really that passionate about business. So I was in all these classes like international business and hating it, basically. I didn't like economics. I mean, I never found any of the whole business thing very exciting. And so on the side, I was like studying psychology. I was reading self-help books. I was looking at, how does the brain work, the mind. So I naturally had a passion, and I didn't follow it when I would say in my 20s. I had to wait until I was 29, 30 to shift into my passion. And I just think that can happen to us. We have the fear of going for maybe what we really are excited about because we think it's not going to be very lucrative or too complicated, or how do we make money doing this?
Right. Even though you took that route as working at a corporation and getting your MBA, would you say that helped your, did that help now that you're doing what you're doing?
Well, of course, I mean, something I've come to realize through the many years of having a business and even just being alive is I think that everything I've ever done has contributed to who I am. And I have learned and grown from all those experiences. So I have a gratitude even for things that weren't exactly my cup of tea or where I was uncomfortable and not happy. And so I think my experiences at Procter & Gamble taught me a ton that I did, especially in the first 10 years of my business as a coach, use because I was a business coach to begin with. I had helped people with marketing and niche and branding, unique selling propositions. Like I know a lot about marketing, probably because I spent quite a bit of time doing that for Procter & Gamble.
Right. So now from going to, working at a corporation, what are you mostly focused on now?
So right now I'm focused on women, specifically more women, but empowerment and relationship coaching. So what that really means is helping people uncover negative patterns that they've been stuck in and help them reclaim their power so that they can create relationships and lives that they really love. So that's my main mission is really uncovering those patterns and those habits and behaviors and belief systems that are holding us back.
Right. Was this something that was always like in back of your mind, like when you were, in Paris and Procter and Gamble, and people would come up to you, and I'm pretty sure if they would talk to you about relationships, and then was that something that you started learning, or where did it come up that you started enjoying to coach other people in regards to relationships and stuff like that?
Well, I mean, it's been a long road. Obviously, I've been a coach for more than 20 years, so there's a lot of different paths. What I think really happened was that, well, there's so many parts to the story. What drove me into the relationship world, honestly, was my marriage. So, which I cover in the book, The Golden Cage. My marriage was it was fairly rocky to begin with. There was a lot of me trying to fit in, trying to pretend I was something I was not. And I learned a lot of techniques during that time, workshops, a lot of psychotherapy techniques to help make our relationship better. We actually did improve our relationship, and specifically the levels of authentic communication that we learned, our sense of our ability to be intimate and real and vulnerable with my ex-husband. There was a whole progression in that. And then in the book, it explains that, but in the end, my ex-husband fell in love with someone else, and there was this whole crazy breakdown. So it threw me even deeper into like, wow, how do you make a relationship really work? Like it came from this part of myself, which is I really want to have successful, loving relationships in my life. So that's how I started more down that path and the business coaching path, which is what I'd been doing prior to the end of the marriage.
Once you broke, once you realized that you were in that golden cage, um, once you realized that and once you broke out of it, was that also when you were with your corporation? That like both things just happened and just say, you know what? Forget my ex-husband, forget my corporation. I'm doing my own thing.
Just No, it wasn't quite that easy. So I had broken out of the corporation pretty much when I met my ex-husband. And
Okay.
I became a psychotherapist. So I went back to school, got a master's in psychology, studied Jungian archetypal psychology, um, studied hypnotherapy, became a certified hypnotherapist. I studied EMDR. I really went down the psychotherapy path because I knew that was my passion. And so I created my own psychotherapy business. And so I worked mostly though with fear, my clients' fear, overwhelm, empowerment, getting themselves out of unhealthy patterns. So I was really focused on, I would say, like abandonment issues, rejection, all those sort of things. So on individuals. And then there came a time when I was with my ex-husband and we were together at the time, my husband, and there's just a relationship. There were things that were kind of not working in it. And that's when I started getting more into kind of the relationship aspects of things and going to different courses and seminars on relationship work, reading a ton and kind of developing techniques. And we worked together, the two of us, because my ex-husband was also really into personal growth and he also had his own business. So we kind of took it on as a mission for us to really grow and evolve as a couple. To some degree, that's not explained in the book.
Right. And I mean, you talk about your ex-husband and how things got out of hand, and and as I was reading, I was the whole time, even just the beginning of it, it was already tense, and I'm already nervous for you. And on here on the podcast, sometimes I do have to share some personal stuff, and you know and I can imagine, like in your position, like I would be even more nervous or even more scared to get on a personal level.
Yeah. So about being vulnerable in the book, I think the key to evolving and growing as a human is our willingness to be vulnerable. And I'm really taking that on as much as I can. And it's not easy. So that book really pushed me into being super vulnerable. And
Mm,
that's the feedback I get from most people, is that they appreciate how real I was in telling my story and the pain of it. And I didn't even tell, I would say, 100% of the crazy details of that story. But basically, the unfolding of that story and being real and vulnerable, I think, does help other people, because other people can be in very difficult, kind of traumatic relationship experiences that may lead to an ending. And one of my objectives is to really share that even in that moment when it can be totally crazy and you feel overwhelmed with betrayal or anger or grief, that in the end, there's often a silver lining. There's often some gift in that experience. And for me, I am profoundly grateful that the entire thing happened, because I was actually miserable in the relationship. I was just trying to make it better. I mean, from hindsight, I know how unhappy I really was and how we really weren't a good match. And I was trying to conform to make it better. And I was afraid, and I was really in this cage, this relationship cage. And so I have so much gratitude for the fact that another woman came in, basically, and through that whole, her falling in love, them falling in love, my ex-husband with her, and that whole relationship ending, how that allowed me to finally have the guts to break free of the relationship and go on now to manifest my dream relationship with my soulmate. I'm just so amazingly happy. Now
right.
it's like night and day.
And I mean, those things do suck, but I feel like just like life and relationships, sometimes you need things like that to happen to really test your marriage or test your relationship, because then you will see exactly where the weaknesses are. You could either grow from it
Right.
or you could break up from it.
Right. I mean, I think that it all goes back to being vulnerable and authentic. Like for me, I I believe this is what I help my clients with. I believe that's important to get real about what do we really need in a relationship and what's really important to us. And so that we come from this place of empowerment, like these are my needs, my wants, this is who really my criteria are for being in a relationship. And then we see whether our partner can match us. I mean, does this work? Are we matched? Are we being met? So that I think is the healthy way of operating versus the other way, which is sort of settling, which is what I have done most of my life. I kept settling, like, oh, well, this is okay. This part is beautiful. This part, it will work. But
Mhm.
actually that settling energy often means that there are some big dis, places in your relationship where you're not aligned. And that fact that you're not aligned often creates chaos and eventually drama, trauma, all sorts of crazy things happen and it can kind of explode. But that said, just because you're experiencing a challenge in your relationship doesn't mean that the relationship can't work. So
Mhm.
there's really, I do believe, and I have seen this happen with couples, that I do believe if you get really clear on what you want and you communicate that this gives the other person in the relationship the opportunity to show up and say, yeah, I also want that. And for you to clear away the misunderstandings, whatever has led to the distance, to the arguments, that there can be a clearing away and you can start afresh. So I don't want to give the impression that just because it feels like you're not in alignment right now, that the whole relationship doesn't work. I mean, there are opportunities to grow and evolve so that it
Right.
can work. It's not 100% guaranteed. You could have an alignment in the future, or it may not work. Anyway, based on a lot of different factors.
Now, so before you dive into a relationship, would you say that you have to be picky on what you want? And do you almost have to ask, do you almost have to ask a bunch of questions?
Yeah, well, I think there's two parts to it. There is you first being really clear on what's important to you and what you need. And the second part then is obviously sort of gauging where your partner falls with regards to these needs and desires and wants. And there are what I would say, the core needs and wants and desires and values. And if those aren't met, it's difficult for the relationship to function. If there's some smaller ones, you're like, oh, that's kind of nice to have, then probably that relationship still could be healthy. So it's kind of the level of importance. But the other thing that I think is even more important, and what I noticed for me, at least in my relationships and dating, because I did a lot of dating in my life too, is that what would happen is I would be going along in a relationship and all of a sudden a little red flag would appear. Something I'd be like, ooh, or maybe a yellow flag. Oh, I don't know if I really like that. I don't know if I really like that behavior. I don't know if I like the fact that whatever, they had three beers, or that they didn't call me when they said they were going to call me. These tiny little things maybe from the outside. But they were kind of like these warnings. And there was this level of uncomfortableness that I was starting to experience. And instead, in that moment of saying, like, hey, this may not be working, let me really get clear on if this is okay with me, I would brush it off and say, that's only a little thing. Let's keep on going. And all those little things would add up. And so eventually, the relationship, I would be able to see, okay, this relationship's not going to work. But I think that I held on to that relationship probably longer than necessary because I didn't want to acknowledge the things that weren't working, because I was afraid. There was fear that I was being, too picky, that I was never going to find somebody anyway. So I might as well just settle. So there's this whole kind of energy of settling in there. And what I really teach my clients and really believe strongly is to have the energy of sorting versus settling. I think it's really key.
Mhm.
You
Where do
sort
you
through people, not settle for people.
where do you think this fear in the relationship comes? Because it feels like it's almost there whether you want it or not.
Hmm. Well, I think one of the big, I mean, everybody has different, there are different fears that keep you in a relationship that's not healthy or that you're not in alignment with. One of the big ones though is fear of being alone. I
Mm,
think that that's like a huge one in our world, in our society, because at least for me, being alone is a really big thing. Like the fact that you might face having to go through life by yourself and you don't have the support you need emotionally, physically, maybe financially. So the whole facing the fear of being alone is key actually to having a good relationship, because if you're always afraid that somebody's about to leave you, that you can't survive without them, then you get sort of needy and attach yourself like, okay, I have to have this person because I can't be by myself, and that energy is felt by the other person, by your partner, and it pushes them away, right, this neediness. So this whole dynamic becomes very unhealthy. What I found is I did a ton of work, and I talk about it in the Golden Cage, but a lot of work about around my fear of being alone. And
mm,
that really helped me create a more solid foundation in my current relationship, with my partner now, where I just feel really good and about who I am. And there's not this sense of attachment like there used to be, this desperation that I used to have when I was younger.
right. This might not be the right word to use, but I feel like sometimes a relationship could also be considered as, just like everything else, like as work, because, or, it work in order for it to succeed. And
Right.
a lot of that work requires, because I mean, even with COVID happening, we were just talking about that we have a fear of being alone. But during COVID, we were with our partner almost all the time, 24/7. And there's some people that actually took that into consideration and actually helped their marriage or their relationship, but there was
Mhm.
also couples that almost couldn't stand each other and they wanted their own alone time.
Yeah. So I believe that alone time is really crucial and important too. But it's like there needs to be a sense of togetherness and a sense of autonomy in a relationship, and the right combination depending on the individuals who are in the relationship. So what you said about COVID, I think is key. It did, on one hand, give us the opportunity to spend more quality time with our partners for the most part, and have more time at home and slow things down. On the other hand, because of the spatial issues for many people being in close quarters, maybe it was hard for them to create a sense of autonomy, a sense of having their own interests or space, or to be able to do their own projects, or just time to think and be by themselves. So it does go back to a key component also in relationships is your own mental health, taking care of your
Mm,
own needs. Because if you don't have that space to take care of your own needs, it's hard for you to show up for your partner. So that goes back to this whole thing about how do you create the right amount of space in a
mhm,
relationship, and that really I think depends on the members of the relationship who makes up the relationship. Everybody needs a different level of space, and something that I work with couples on is determining what the right amount of space is for each individual, and how the other partner can become comfortable with that amount of space. Sometimes someone wants a lot more space than their partner, and that can even be a really challenging issue that could lead to the end of a relationship if it's super drastic. Does that
right.
make sense? If
Yes.
somebody's on a spectrum where they need so much space, it may not work for one of the partners.
Right. Yeah, sounds about right. So during COVID and you coaching relationships, would you say that you got more busy? Was it the same? Or how was your experience during COVID?
Well, honestly, it was a challenge for me personally because I was having to shift so many things. So I would say that there was probably, definitely was doing less, and I was not as out there as I normally would have been because I had been
Mm,
doing marketing in a different way and talking more to people face to face, and seeing people. I'd had like groups in my house. I mean, it just felt like things were really different. So well, I think that people may have had more of a need. A lot of people, one, were scared to even spend any money or even really think about that. They were just like hanging on for dear life. And I also was going through a lot of stuff myself to really sort things out, like what's really going on here. So I think there were
Right.
definitely a few months during the time period of, March through maybe May, in the March, April, May time period, especially like a year ago, where I was kind of challenged and really, really trying to get my own space of like the fears that were coming up for me, the fears of like, what is happening to humanity? So I needed a lot more time for my own, I would say, self-care. So I
Right.
was, I was doing less work.
And I mean, you go through clients, you go through a lot of clients, right? After a certain amount, I would imagine that you would kind of, even before they finish the conversation, you automatically already know kind of what's going on and what might be the solution to it.
Yeah, I mean, oftentimes I can sort of tell what's going on fairly fast. What I
Mm.
normally do with a client is when I meet somebody new, and however they come to me, is I always do a free 30-minute to 60-minute call with them, right? Kind of an intro call, just to understand who they are and if I can help them. So
Mm.
normally that 30 to 60 minutes allows me to understand the core challenges they are facing. And they normally fall in, some common categories, right? One of the big things, is often they come because there's trust issues, there's communication issues, there's intimacy issues. Those three are one of the big three, right? You see in relationship. So I normally kind of find that the biggest challenge oftentimes actually is that there's a lack of truth telling and revealing in the relationship, that it's
Mm.
closed down, and they're not even really quite sure what exactly is going on with their partner, why their partner's either withdrawn or angry. And so there's just been like this, it's closed down, the communication, basically. So one of I think the most important things to do in a relationship like that is to first help people clear the triggers that have developed, clear the negative emotions that have been piling up. So there's so much, often people are feeling so like angry because they've been ignored or they haven't had communication. They're feeling rejected. Right? They're feeling blamed. They're feeling defensive. There's all these negative emotions that have come up. And that's why it's so hard for them to have a real conversation, because they get triggered so quickly by what someone says. All of a sudden they're like, how dare you say that to me again? And, so we have to first, I would say, calm everything down, help each partner get to a more stable place. And I normally work with, I would say, more the one person in the partnership first, like the female. I tend to
Mhm.
work more with them first.
Mm. And as with males and females, and as far as communications, it's always so different because I mean, with male, it's already from the get-go, it's already hard for a man to express how he's feeling, how to communicate, because one, we've always been told, or there's been this thing where you kind of can't express yourself. You can't show any kind of feminism, you know?
Right. Yeah. I think that women naturally are more focused on relationships, and these are all generalizations, everybody, please. So of course there are men who are too, but just because of the whole, I mean, having children and the fact that you're wanting the whole family unit to function, right? So how the
Mhm.
relationships are working tends to be a focus, more for women in general, whereas men in general tend to be focused a little bit more on the career. I'm not saying that, obviously, in this day and age, both can go back and forth. But I guess what I'm getting to is I understand women probably better because I'm a woman, and that's why I tend to focus on that. And then I kind of help them sort of see how they can support their partner, their husband, or if it's another female, that's too, in opening back up. So one of the big things that I learned, unfortunately, in my past relationships, is that I was judging and blaming and being like controlling and doing all these things, trying to get my partner to do something different.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that energy was pushing them away. And so what I work on helping women see, specifically, is really helping them see that, oh, if you push someone towards something, oops, I hit my microphone. If you push someone towards something, they're going to back away naturally. They're going to become more and more like, whoa, what are you trying to do? So all of that forcing and like, hey, you better be different. And how could you do that? All of that really intense controlling and trying to make somebody different, it will push your partner away. So I really help them take a step back and say, okay, let's relax and let's adopt a whole different kind of energy. What I recommend is, instead of pushing and trying to get your way, why don't instead you adopt an attitude of curiosity and exploration and really see what really is happening? Where really is my partner? How does my partner really feel or believe about this? Why is my partner operating this way? Why is it different than the way I'm operating? So this whole attitude of exploration and curiosity in a relationship can reopen things up so that you can have those conversations to more fully understand your partner, and then work together on a plan to create some change that will help both of you get your needs met. So anyway.
And I mean, what I really like also about your book is that if you're in the golden cage and you don't really realize that you are there, there's a couple of questions that you can even ask yourself to really help you identify or, see within yourself whether you are where you are, or whether you're in the golden cage, or whether you're not.
Yeah, that's great. So I mean, the questions that, I help my clients really focus on, and myself, I think is helpful. It's more about checking with your heart. Like, how happy am I really? Am I dreaming of doing something else and that I'm not allowing myself to do? Have I always had a different dream that I keep saying, no, I can't go there. I can't go there. So often there's something that's calling to you and you're ignoring it. So asking yourself those questions, like, what is it that I actually want to be doing that I may not be doing? And if there's something else that comes to you, you may be stuck in a golden cage. Another one is, how happy are you when you wake up? How excited are you about being alive? How excited are you about going out into the world and doing whatever you're doing? If you're not super excited, you probably are experiencing some level of entrapment, because when you're on path and your heart is speaking to you, there's a natural inspiration that comes. People naturally are inspired to do whatever their heart is asking them to do, whatever their heart's calling is. That's the term I refer to a lot in the book. Like, your heart is calling you to do something. You have a purpose, you have a mission, you have an interest. And if you keep squashing your heart's calling because you're afraid, then you probably are in a golden cage if you have fear around doing something you've always wanted to do. And it can be a life cage. A golden cage is more of a life one. Like, maybe you want to live somewhere else and I've always wanted to live in Costa Rica, and you've read books about living in Costa Rica and you're inspired by it, but you're too afraid to actually take the steps to go and follow your dream. That's an example. That's not even a career or a life cage. Or a relationship cage.
And like you mentioned, you can also apply those same questions, whether you're in a life cage, whether you're in a relationship, or even a career cage, right?
Yeah, totally. It works for really any aspect of your life. You can ask yourself about your career. Wow, how excited am I to go to work in the morning? How do I have a vision that I'm inspired by right now in my career? Is there some other career I've always really wanted to do that I'm not allowing myself to do? Right. Those are all good questions to ask yourself. Have I always wanted to run off and, be a writer? And some part of you may say, well, that's just for dreamers. I shouldn't dream like this. The truth is that if you're getting this inspiration and these ideas and this calling on a regular basis, there's probably more to it than that you're just dreaming. And I
Mhm.
think dreaming is very valuable because all of our dreams actually, everything we've ever dreamed, when we dream something up, we allow it to come into being. So everything that we have today, someone at one point said, oh, I have a vision, I have a dream, and they made it a reality. So I really believe in the power of dreaming.
Right. It seems like it's also this the like this evolution that us humans go through to where we have to, we have to evolve and adapt, whether it may be in our career, whether it might be in life, or whether it might be in a relationship, because things not all things are the same. There's things that are happening all the time, even in your life. There's new technology, there's stuff going on in your relationship. Somebody's always changing, moods are changing in career, and it does, like I said, it seems like it's this evolution that we have to adapt to, no matter whether we look at it from the life aspect, career aspect, or the relationship aspect.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think we're always evolving as human beings, and that's a good thing. And actually, if we feel like we're not evolving, then we may be stuck more in a cage than we want to be, honestly. That every time we get the courage to leap outside or take those steps outside of our cage is when we actually we evolve even more. We're really on a fast track of growth. That said, I think it's really important to continually sort of ask ourselves, well, what's next for me? What am I
Mm,
excited about? And not just my career, but also in our relationships. To make our relationships work, it's good to have a vision for your relationship. Where do you want it to go? What do you guys want to do together? What more do you want to explore, experience? And that will keep it more alive than just sort of taking it for granted. I think it's good to have a shared relationship vision too.
right. What would you recommend or suggest to, uh, you know, people that are kind of stuck in this cage, but they're also in a very crucial relationship where, where there's abuse, there's violence, and they just don't seem to get out of it, or they feel threatened by their partner.
Yeah, I mean, definitely if there's any sort of abuse or violence, and things have gone to that level, they definitely should seek some sort of outside help because I think that especially in an abusive your relationship, you need professional support and specifically from those who have experience with abuse, which is not something that I work directly with. I normally refer people who to other professionals when they have this kind of level of abuse. But what I do think is important, no matter what, is that one is that you realize that you have more power and strength than you know. Because a lot of times you're willing to put up with this because you're in a victim mentality. So one of the things that I work with people and I really think is important is realizing how much power you actually have and that you're not a victim. And this takes unwinding quite a few, I would say, past emotional baggage, clearing some of that, maybe things you learned as a child, beliefs you might have about yourself, and confronting some of your fears. So, learning how to move out of victimhood into, let's say, more self empowerment and realize, wow, I have a lot of power. I am the one that's creating my life. It may not be easy, the decisions to leave an abusive relationship or the decisions to say, to really look at where you are in your relationship and if it's a place you want to be. Yet you are the only one actually who has the power because you're the only one who knows what's really happening. You're the only one who can take the steps and the action steps. The first step, though, is to simply reach out for help. I mean, really, it's so much easier to do this if you get some support along the way. It's hard when you're by yourself and you don't have anybody to kind of show you the possibilities. because that's what it really is I, even in my relationship with my ex-husband, there were definitely moments where I felt so overwhelmed by the whole thing. I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know how to handle the fact that this other woman was involved with it, and how disempowering it was to me. And the first thing I had to do was actually work on getting my power back. And I had to do a lot of like emotional clearing work and reach out and get help for that.
Mm. Now, you were a branch manager, correct? That
Brand manager, yeah.
yeah. So how was that, you being a woman? How was that, the atmosphere and the way you got treated?
Yeah. Well, I suffered a lot from inferiority complexes, specifically when I was in that role. I was originally an assistant brand manager, and I felt like I was being constantly criticized and judged for my inability to do certain things the right way. And so I basically what happened is I got really stressed out. I started feeling sick to my stomach going to work, and it was this really bad sign. And I tried to avoid work, and I was basically hiding out in the restroom or going on these long walks at lunchtime, and I was really miserable. But then I went and I did my mother actually was a hypnotherapist and is a hypnotherapist, and she told me about hypnotherapy at that time, and I was in my 20s, and said, you should go see a hypnotherapist and clear some of this negative energy that you have, and your feeling of inferiority and low self-esteem that's impacting your ability to work. And so I did. I went on I did 5 sessions like in a week, and it really helped me clear away my sense of victimhood about it, and being taken advantage of. And it helped me start back on a path of self-acceptance and self-love. And so I did this, and then I did this exercise basically for 3 months. I was really serious about building up my own sense of self-love and not allowing my boss and my coworkers to like make me feel bad about myself anymore, and for me to believe the negative things that I heard or that I was thought that they were telling me. So I basically every day for like 3 months or so, I would walk to work, and I had quite a long trek to work. And I would say to myself out loud a lot, actually, and it's not so everybody could hear me, but in a soft way, I love you, Margot. I love this about you. I love how strong you are. I love how courageous you are. And I would just do this really strong, I love you talk every single day. And I got stronger. I started really listening to myself and like, yes, you can do this. You're courageous. You're strong. And then my boss came to me and she said, pretty much about 6 months after this whole thing had happened, after the hypnotherapy and the self-love exercises had started. And she said, hey, I don't know what happened to you, but you're so much stronger than you used to be. And like, you're really showing up differently. She like gave me this really positive report, and then she promoted me after I thought she was going to fire me. So it was really life-changing. I learned the power of stepping into my power, which is funny to say.
Right. So you have to kind of build yourself up, right? And then once you build yourself up, everybody around you will notice.
Yeah, and I think that one really important thing about this, I think it's a 2-step process. I think it's clearing the old and then reprogramming in the new empowering mindset. So when I work with my clients, it's about let's clear away the old beliefs and negative feelings, and let's find a new empowering, I call it mantra or phrase for you to focus on and really build and use in your daily life. And so those 2 steps I think work really well. I think if we just move right to affirmations, I'm happy there's lots of affirmations going, out there for us to use and programs. But I think if you try to use affirmations too quickly without doing some of the clearing work, it doesn't always work as well.
Do you have any like 3 or 5 tips that you usually give to your clients and they come back and say, wow, that was really helpful. We're doing so much better. Thank you for that.
Well, one of the so it's going to be hard to just say 3 or 4 tips, but I'm going to say 3 or 4 areas at least. So
Okay,
one
yeah,
of them is about empowered conversations. So I really believe that communication is one of the pillars to a healthy relationship. So this little tip I give people all the time about empowered communication, and it's a 3-step process. So basically, if you're having a conversation with your partner and they're saying something to you that you disagree with, instead of pushing back and saying, I don't like what you're saying, I disagree, that's not true, why are you saying that? Instead of saying all that, I recommend this approach.
Okay.
I recommend to first validate your partner, what they're saying, by saying something like, oh, I really get what you're saying. I get it. I understand it. That makes sense. This doesn't mean that you agree with them. It just means that you understand what they're saying. So that the validation comes from just saying, yes, I get that. That makes sense. I understand you. All of that naturally creates more of a connection. They're already getting like, oh, she kind of gets me. That's great.
Right.
So first, validate, validate, validate. And why I say it 3 times is I believe that actually doing it 3 times in a row is really powerful. Don't just do it once. Do it 3 times in that conversation. Keep validating. Then once you've validated, use the second step, which is using the word and. It's a connecting phrase. So you want to connect the validation to the third part, which is leading with what your truth is and what you really need to communicate. But if you use the word but or any other word that like that, it negates the validation and it puts the person on the defensive again. So basically the way to do it is to say, yes, I really get what you're saying. I got you. I understand you. And I really need XYZ. I really need some quality time together tonight. I really need for you to support me in this area. So in that I part in that truth, I call it truth, the truth telling. What's your truth telling? What's important, of course, is to use the word I. I'm sure you've heard that a million times. Start with yourself and just be very direct with what you need. Because that's the second mistake we make a lot of, is that we go on these very like indirect routes to try to get our needs met. We're like, oh, if you could possibly do this, maybe next Wednesday. And then the other person's like, what are you trying to get? What am I supposed to be doing? And it creates this weird, chaotic conversation where there's misunderstandings and confusion. So I really believe that just a simple statement of, I need more quality time together. I need help with this situation. I need your opinion about whatever. That's really helpful. Then the most important thing is, if you use that one statement, don't continue going on and on about it. Let the other person respond, give them space. And this is where I always was challenged in my relationships, is that I would keep talking and the other person would get more and more confused and they would get more and more frustrated because they didn't have space to communicate back.
I see. Now you who are, you're talking to all these clients and you're listening all this, and I mean, I would imagine your head just being, always working nonstop. How do you keep yourself sane, and how do you not let that affect you?
Well, I really believe in the importance of self-care. And one of my favorite things to do, I love the outdoors. I'm really into it. I live in Colorado, so I'm really blessed with some beautiful mountains and just the best weather, lots of sunshine. So but every single day I go outside pretty much. I mean, maybe there's like a few days a year, but I go outside and I go for a run. Unless it's super cold, I go for a walk. So I make sure that I have quality time outside. And that's to clear the air, really makes me feel good. I also do a meditation practice to sort of center myself, and that's really helpful. So those two are kind of main keys for me, I think, is being outdoors, having some physical activity and doing meditation, those combinations can, I think, are really important, at least for my own self-care. And I think everybody needs some sort of self-care program like that, no matter what job they're doing, really.
Right.
And then, I'm also blessed to, have to be in a beautiful partnership, and having quality partnership time also really rejuvenates me and makes me feel great. So,
Right. And I never been to Colorado, but from what I see and what I hear, just being outdoors in Colorado sounds like a perfect place to be where there's mountains and there's trails. How is it living in
mhm.
Colorado?
Oh, I'm so blessed. I love it. We have over 300 days of sunshine, and I go. We can go hiking, and this time of year
Really?
is so beautiful. The flowers are starting to bloom, like in my yard. The tulips came up, so I just
Mm.
think that we're so blessed with nature, and I see owls and hawks in my backyard, and I believe that connecting with nature is so centering. Like, it just takes us back to the now and the present moment. And so hiking in the summertime and being outside is key. And then in the wintertime, well, I'm a skier, so I love to be on the mountain, skiing and
Right.
connecting with nature that way.
So whether it's snow or sun, you're ready for it.
Yeah, I'm ready for it. I'm an outdoors kind of girl, like many of us who live here.
Right.
Yes,
that's
it's I'm definitely grateful, and I'm even more grateful after having lived in France. I loved France, and unfortunately, Paris doesn't have that much sunshine, so I definitely miss the
oh
sun.
really?
Yeah, it can be pretty dreary and rainy,
Really?
especially in
Wow.
the winter. Yeah, the summers are great there, but the winter can be pretty challenging in Paris.
Oh really?
Mhm.
Is there a lot of snow?
No, no, it's more not quite like Seattle, but it's a temperate climate, but it has quite a bit of rain and clouds, humidity, and not near as much sunshine. So there you can go quite a few days and not see the sun, quote unquote, kind
Right.
of dreary, overcast.
Now in the relationships, I feel like one of the also a tough thing to do is, once you ask yourself these questions, whether you're in the golden cage or not, you realize that you are, and you do whatever you can to break out of it, and then you end up breaking out of it. What what can you do for it, even though you know that it's a golden cage, and even though you're not in a very healthy relationship, what can you do to prevent yourself from going back to it?
That's a great question. I think it's so important to focus on healing yourself and empowering
Mm,
yourself. So if you can keep focusing on what is it that I really need, you're going to get stronger and stronger. Because I think there's this period in the cage, like you break out of the cage, but then there's what I call kind of strengthening. You open the door to the cage, you kind of walked out, but you haven't really flown away. So there's this period of time that I'm calling strengthening your wings to fly,
mhm,
like getting yourself stronger. And so during that time, well, one of the most important things actually is grieving. It's key to grieve. Grieving is part of the natural process, to grieve your past relationship, to grieve a past career, to grieve what you did, like the golden part of the cage. And to give yourself time to grieve actually strengthens you. If you don't allow yourself to grieve and you pretend that you don't have any grieving to be done, then it sneaks up on you and you're never fully able to have that sense of empowerment and ability to move on to the next thing, because it's subtly in your energy field still. So I let myself grieve for like an entire year. When my marriage ended, like literally every single day I would
mhm.
go for a walk with my dog and let myself cry, let myself do some grieving practices to just be in the feelings of having lost that relationship and everything that went with it.
Right. It's crazy because it almost seems like being in a relationship is kind of like a race, or you're kind of on this timing clock. And the
Mm,
older you get, the more pressure you feel, the more maybe the more desperate you feel, especially from hearing it from your parents. Oh, when are you gonna get a girlfriend? When are you gonna get married? When are you gonna have kids? Where do you think that comes from, as far as feeling this pressure, this timing clock to get in a relationship, get a family started, and all this?
well, I mean, obviously I think for me, there's two components. One is societal conditioning, that many of us were taught, or our parents specifically, that, okay, this is what you do. It's important to continue on the family lineage. Let's get you married. Let's have those kids. So it's a part of our society kind of conditioning, along with getting a good job that, pays all the bills and where you can be secure. And that's kind of like, I would say, society's norm. And so we get a lot of messages to conform to society's norm. And if you're a woman, and there's also the whole question of, having a child and your reproductive health, and how after a certain age it's harder to have children. And so there is a pressure there that I understand. I do believe, though, it's more important for you to create a relationship where you can truly be happy than to settle for one, because in that settling, you create so much drama and so many issues, not just for yourself, but for children, if you're having children. And it also negatively impacts your career if you're an entrepreneur, and if you even you work for someone else. I think relationship challenges impact like all aspects of your life. So
Right.
if you're settling for a relationship where you're really unhappy in, you're not going to be able to be fulfilled in any sector, I think, of your life to the level that you could, to your potential, I would say.
Right. And it seems like even having children in your relationship could be a big factor, because I forget where, but I was reading a story where the children can kind of just keep the relationship together. But
Right.
once the once your kid grows up, once he goes to college and start doing his own thing, then you're stuck with your partner, and now you don't know what to do, or you don't know how to become a couple again.
Yeah, well, because I don't know if you don't spend time creating a foundation for success in your couplehood, then it's hard for it to survive after a child leaves, if that's the reason for your relationship. I think that it's important for couples to have more than just children as the reason for them existing, right? Like,
Okay.
that's why I go back to this vision. Like, what is important to us as a couple? What do we want to experience and do? And what are the needs and wants we both have for our couplehood, right? And so I think that many couples, of course, having a child is a huge responsibility, and it's a lot of work, and it can obviously create tension in a relationship, and a lot of challenges. Yeah, with that, I think it's important to be clear on creating the time, the space, having the skills to make sure that your relationship does have this foundation for success, despite the children, or because of the children, or even with the whole child thing coming into play, so that it can survive the children leaving, or even it would make the whole relationship much better for the child if they can witness a happy relationship, right?
Mhm.
Because our children are learning through seeing us, right, in action, for being an example, right? We are examples to our children. I know I'm going to be, totally authentic here. I don't have any children, so I haven't had any personal experience with my own children. Of course, I'm an aunt, and I have a niece, and I've had experiences being a nanny, so I have some experiences with children. So I can't personally say to what level it actually impacts a relationship. I've had some stepchildren along the way, in quote unquote, in some relationships for some years. So I've had a little experience. And even those experiences show me that, it's a child, or children, add an entire dimension to a relationship that's pretty challenging to manage. But what I always go back to is, I think that knowing how to create and maintain a foundation of a relationship is what is key to the success of the relationship.
Mm. And once you're in a relationship and it's been, because it seems like you can also become settled, or you can become comfortable, right? And then just live like a normal relationship of just coming home, being around, and nothing really exciting, nothing really spontaneous. What are some of the things that you can do, let's say after 10 years, after 20 years, and so on, that you can still keep that fire burning?
Oh, I mean, that is such a good question. So, because I talk about these 6 pillars of relationship, and one of the pillars is play. That's that I talk about. So, I really believe adding in play is really key, and conscious play. And I think it's a challenge for adults anyway, not even just a couple, that we get so serious as adults. We don't have time for play. We have too much on our plates.
Right.
So I think one of the ways to actually add, there's 2 things that I would suggest. One of the things that I think is really important for long-term couples is to consciously create play dates, time when they're literally playing and having fun, and for them to have conversations and schedule and actually surprise each other with play dates. Like, we're gonna do something totally different tonight. Don't tell them what it is, and go skating together. Go take a picnic in the mountains under the moonlight. Do something that's spontaneous and fun, that really gets that childlike part of you activated, because that's what will bring back kind of the fun connection energy that can go stale. So that's where the work really is, honestly, is in being creative and in being willing to say, my relationship is so important, our relationship is so important, that I'm going to take the time to schedule something and to make sure that it has some creative, unusual spark to it as much as possible. So that's what I recommend is try to surprise your partner with some fun play dates.
Right. Very cool. And then prior to, the actual podcast, we had talked, and you had mentioned that you kind of also wanted to start up your own podcast. How's that been?
Yeah. I haven't got there yet. It's there's so much to think about in that, but most likely it would be something around relationship resets. How can you shift your relationship? And I would have guests on to talk about relationship health. And so right now there's another woman who does some relationship work, and I did set up a meeting next week to chat with her a little bit about that, and if she wanted to do a podcast collaboration. But it would probably be more like in the fall. Because I'm really been having so much fun being a guest on different podcasts. I have quite a few booked now for the next couple months.
Nice.
Yeah.
Then I don't know if you remember, but one of the things that that I came across as I'm doing my podcast is it's called Anchor. And what Anchor, it really you do your recording and it distributes it to Spotify, it distributes it to Apple Podcasts, to Google Cast, to radio. I mean, it has a ton of platforms that it distributes it to. And if you are planning to eventually start up your own podcast, I have actually created this. Oh, I'm sorry. Created this link where you're able to kind of start your own.
Oh.
Share it. So if you go to anchor.fm dash Omar dash Ramirez 09, you could just click on make your own podcast for free. Yeah. And you can go ahead and, all you have to do is just record it and upload it, and that'll go ahead and distribute it to these platforms, and of course more. Oh,
well, that's awesome. Send me the link, or and I will check it out. And maybe this fall I'll keep in touch with you and let you know what happens. So many exciting possibilities out there.
Yes. So to all the listeners, can if they want to reach out to you, if they want to message you, ask you some questions, what would be the platforms or where can they reach you at?
So a couple things. One is margotzaher.com. So my website, that's margotzahher.com. I'm sure it'll be in the show notes. And then also I'm doing a relationship reset boot camp. Very exciting for women to help teach them the skills to be in a relationship in a healthy way and take their current relationships to a whole new level of health and happiness. And so you can check that out at relationshipresetbootcamp.com. And that's it. Those are two possible ways of checking it out.
Okay. And then they can also find you on Instagram, right?
Oh, yes. You can find me on Instagram at Margot Mindset Coach. And that's my handle on Instagram.
Awesome. Well, thank
Yeah,
you,
I'm
Margot.
on all the normal channels. I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter too.
Okay, there you go. Okay, well, thank you so much, Margot. Before we leave, do you think there's anything that would be important that we forgot to talk about or I didn't mention that would be important for the audience to know?
No, I mean, I really think that you did a great job with this interview and it was
Thank
so
you.
much fun. And I guess I would just like to say that, we all have the power to create whatever our heart truly desires. So trust your heart, trust what is there, it's communicating to you, and go for it.
I like it. That's a perfect way to end.
Thank you
All
so
right,
much.
Margot, thank you so much. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
So on that message, I will pause for this beverage. I'll be long gone in a second.